But even that, just a quick story on that. A couple years ago, I was down in San Francisco at the Salesforce. So Salesforce is a big database supplier. So most of you probably know about these guys. They have a huge gathering called Dreamforce. And at this particular one that I went to, they were rolling out this idea of the social enterprise. And they were going to brand that, and more in the sense of social media and social networks. And they got huge pushback from the social enterprise sector. Muhammad Yunus in particular, he's kind of the godfather of a lot of this stuff. And they backed off. They said, "You're right. That's not what social enterprise is."
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I think it also, in many ways, I think this basically prepares my first question to you, which is, we've been talking about the concepts of transparency and honesty and social goodness and being embedded in a community for a long time now. And we're already halfway through the first decade of the 21st century. So really, why have things not happened?
You mean in terms of business using itself as a force for good in the world? Why is that not taking off? Is that
why don't we see more and more business being a true social enterprise? Why don't we see more and more business actually being a social business without it being a thing, without it being something which is an outlier? Why isn't it the norm?
Yeah, well, I have two answers for that. The first is that I think you kind of have to look at the economy in the what I would call the global economy of big publicly traded firms, and then the smaller economy of more local firms, many of whom actually do a lot of the stuff, and hopefully we'll get into more of the details of what we mean by this, the social business. But a lot of those businesses actually operate that way, even though they don't think of themselves as a social business. They don't call themselves mission-driven or anything like that. If you examine what they're actually doing, they exhibit a lot of the behavior. So I think that below the surface, there actually is a lot of this that is happening. But on the bigger side of it, the large corporation side of it, I think that we have since the 70s kind of been subjected to a kind of a mass delusion about what the role of business really is.
Well, let's go on.
Yeah, well, I think what happened during that time was that there's this notion of shareholder primacy, which says basically that the primary focus, the only real reason a business exists, is to make profits and pass those profits onto its shareholders. And that thing got embedded in all kinds of thinking by consultants, and it's embedded in business schools, it's embedded everywhere. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons why we've had such a shift in the way that we think about business.
Okay, I mean that's fascinating, because in many ways we also hear that solving the puzzle of social business is part of a $600 billion industry. It's a bit of a puzzle which needs to somehow be a solution to it has to be found in terms of in a practical way. Mm-hmm. And in respect of that, I think you've also got yourself direct experience in terms of the practicalities involved when it comes to running a social business. You used to run a social enterprise yourself, right?
I did, yeah. For about 10 years.
Tell us a little bit about that, yeah. I mean, first of all, obviously, in terms of the ideology, you totally understand it. But in terms of the practicalities, you must have faced quite a steep learning curve.
I definitely did. This was, I started there back in like 2001. It had been, I'd been at Microsoft for about 10 years prior to that. And so, my worldview of how things worked and how to actually get stuff done in a business was completely flipped on its head when I went and decided to go run this organization. It was an existing organization. It was a technology consulting shop. At the time I joined, it was small. I mean, it was we had 6 people at the time. And by the time I left, it got bigger, but not a whole lot bigger. It was about 24 people, something like that. The model was really interesting. By the end, we were about 60, 70, 65, 70% fee for services, so
Okay.
market income, and then the rest of it was supplemented by philanthropy. So it was a really
Oh,
interesting, yeah, it's a very interesting model. I would say that one of the biggest learnings from that is that it takes a lot of creativity to not. I mean, it takes a lot of creativity just to make money, I think, but it takes even more creativity to make money while you're also serving a mission.
okay. And here's an interesting question, because obviously, I mean, we talk in terms of creativity, and creativity has always been part of business. Perhaps we've called it incremental improvements or even innovation, which is a little bit of a leap on top of that. But things have always changed. So why is it so radical when it comes to applying in a social business model?
Why is it so? Why is innovation so
Well,
radical?
yeah, I mean, why do we have to be that extra bit more creative in a social business environment?
Okay.
Shouldn't it be easier, perhaps?
Yeah, you would think so. You would think so. But just it's a very practical problem, which is that if you're trying to just optimize for profits, that's actually, I mean, it's hard enough to do. I mean, as anybody who's run a business knows that just doing that is hard enough. But when you're then trying to basically use the money that's coming in and invest it back into a mission and make sure that every day that the decisions that you're making, you're kind of using this dual mindset. I literally, when I would work, and I'd come into work, I had two things that guided my decisions every day. One was, is this going to break us financially? And that had to come first, honestly. I mean, I wish I could say that wasn't the case, that we were super idealistic in the sense of, no, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. No, that was the first, that had no money, no mission. That's kind of the first mantra. But then the other thing was that by year 6, year 7, we had done a lot of really good thinking about the outcomes that we were trying to achieve for our mission. That was some of the hardest work I've ever done, was thinking in terms of those kind of outcomes and being really disciplined about how to break that down and into measurable objectives that we could actually achieve.
And this, I mean, obviously, we could argue that you have had an advantage here because you came from a corporate background. You brought in the legacy model mentality in many ways, which then you were able to fit into that kind of environment. So you're perfectly aware that you need to create a process which would allow you to get from stage A to stage B. And sort of, reading this and, also following some of the comments on the stream about what you said earlier, the question begs itself. If you have a legacy model business with shareholders, is there ever a chance or even a hope that it would actually translate or transform itself into a real social business?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I'll answer this in two different answers. One is I think that there's some interesting innovations that are happening right now around things like the B Corporation and benefit corporations, that law, the kind of the laws that are being put into place across the United States and abroad too, all over the world actually. Those are aimed at giving the management of the firm the legal grounds to actually pursue objectives other than just profit maximization and passing on as much profit to shareholders as possible. So okay. I think that is a useful step. But in point of fact, actually, if you're a shareholder and you're seeing and you see management making decisions that you believe are taking away your money, right? The dividends that you could be getting, or the profits that could be plowed back into the company to raise its stock price, you're going to be mad, right? And so you're going to put pressure on the board, which then shows up as pressure on the CEO. So on the one hand, I think that there's some interesting innovations that are happening that will help on this front, but fundamentally, I think that there is this very difficult need to kind of keep the stock price at a certain level and to keep the dividends flowing.
Okay, I'm going to stop you here just a minute because we're going to backtrack on this.
Yeah.
Because you're making some really important points. And, we started this segment, this video, basically with you talking,